Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I have decided to do a short chatty kind of video because I need to do something fluffy. I had one of those days at work where you return home feeling a little bit defeated and quite tired. So the more in-depth video that I had planned to do and will now shift into next week has been taken over by this more informal style video. So hopefully you will still enjoy, and if not, then I will see you with the next video soon. What I have decided I'm going to talk about today is the thing that I am using to try to improve my outlook at the end of this very difficult day, and that is my style of documenting what I read and keeping a reading journal. So I just want to chat, and this won't be like going through the setup of a reading journal. It's more just a conversation about why I document what I read and what value I feel like that has brought to my life. So this is something that a couple of people have asked about on the channel. They've asked about how I keep track and what I do to keep track because it can be difficult to know where to start or what is helpful. And I can definitely share what has been helpful for me. So at the present time, I currently track my books in 3 different ways. I use Goodreads, which I think is similar to a lot of people, what a lot of people do. I keep a running list of the books that I have read. So just in a small notebook, I write a heading at the top, books read for the first time in 2021, books reread in 2021, and I keep a running list of the books that I read and just document the date that I have read them. And then the third and the newest thing that I have been doing to keep track of the books that I read is keeping a more detailed and involved book journal. So I'm going to talk about these 3 different things a little bit, starting with Goodreads, because I think this is the method that most people use. I have been using Goodreads at least regularly for the past, I think, 5 to 7 years. I would have to look through my account to know exactly when I started keeping track of everything, but at least for the last 5 or so years, I have been doing the running Goodreads challenge, where you kind of set a goal at the beginning of the year and keep track of the books that you've been reading. And I like Goodreads fine. It is not my favorite website. I have the same hangups about it that so many people do, which is the ability to artificially raise or lower a book's rating before it's even released. So these kind of 5-star spam reviews or 1-star spam reviews, depending on how people feel about a particular author or a particular topic of a book, which I think is nonsense. I don't think you should be allowed to rate a book until at least it's put out. There's no way for us to confirm if people are actually reading the book, but we could make it look like we're at least caring about the fact that you have read it. So I think that that is one major failing. And then you get these artificial numbers on Goodreads. And because it's subjective, it's going to be artificial anyway, but I think that that just adds an extra layer. And there are some really cool videos on BookTube. I know that I have seen Emily Fox do some of these and Elliot Brooks do some of these, where they look at books that are highly rated on Goodreads or rated really low on Goodreads and how that compares to their personal taste and what they might actually enjoy. So I find watching videos like that to be really fun and really informative. Although I must admit that I don't usually look at the star ratings of the books that I have read. I could not tell you the approximate star rating of any of my favorites or least favorites, but I do like watching those kinds of videos when they come around. And I know that Goodreads is a method that a lot of people use for documenting. I don't think I'll switch to another website because I get stuck in my ways and I don't want to adapt to something new, but I am willing to hear anybody's suggestions if they have other programs that they like to use. The second method of recording books, and this is the one that I have been using the longest, is just this running list. And I will pop some pictures up just of the types of lists that I have had. But I have been doing this since 2010, and it is hands down one of the most valuable exercises that I have been doing for the past, well, it's 11 years now because I started in 2010. It has given me such great perspective on what I read, how I read, when I read, the trends in my reading. Even if you're not someone who likes to dive into statistics, just having those lists and being able to flip through them have been incredibly valuable for me. I remember why I started doing this. So I started documenting, as I said, in 2010, which was as I was finishing my undergrad degree, which was in English and French literature, and transferring over into medical school. So I was going to be changing drastically what I was studying and the type of schooling that I was going to be doing. And I thought a lot about medical school in that period of time between undergrad and when school restarted. And I had a lot of fears about what it was going to be like. I had completed an arts degree and I didn't know if I was going to be ready to go back to that really intense studying. I didn't know how much it was going to change my lifestyle, the freedom that I really enjoyed in undergraduate studies where you could build your own schedule and incorporate the things that were important into your life. Going back to that really regimented 9 to 5 classes all day, every day was going to be a big adjustment, and it did end up being a big adjustment. And I was worried how that would reflect on my recreational reading, because reading has always been the thing that I like to do for fun. And I'm really glad that I have a record of how that did change, because it most definitely did. The types of books that I read, even from my first year of medical school to the last 2 years of medical school, which are your practical years where you spend more time in the hospital and less time in the library. And it's really fascinating to see how what I read and how I read it and how quickly I read things changed over that period of time. It sounds so simple to just keep a list of the things that you're reading, but I think that looking at those lists tells me a lot about how I changed as a person, how my tastes changed, how I evolved as a reader and as a human. So it seems like such a simple thing, but it has honestly brought a lot of happiness, a lot of value into my life overall. Last year had signaled 10 years of me recording this information, and being able to look back and reflect on 10 years of reading and how my reading taste changed, how and when I discovered certain authors that I loved, which books I reread every year, which was easy to see through flicking through the pages. I really like having all that information, and I really like documenting at baseline. I love writing lists. I am a very goal-oriented person. I love to be able to write things down. I love to be able to check things off lists. So that's something that will always be appealing to me. And if you are the type of person who likes those sorts of things, then I can only imagine that you would also find this to be a really valuable exercise. I also started documenting, along with just books that I have read, I started documenting books that I would like to read. So I know on Goodreads there is the option to create a TBR, and I definitely add books that sound interesting to that want to read pile. But I also really enjoy finding lists of books that are kind of outside my scope. So I'll often look on the internet for lists of people's most influential books, or the books that had the biggest impact on those. And I will also record those in my reading notebook, just so that I can go back and feel that like little sense of accomplishment that I get when I tick one of the books off those lists. And I know that is not the healthiest way to approach life, in making everything into a goal, because then it feels like if you don't do things that you are a failure or not accomplishing things. And I have to say that I don't tend to take that negative frame away from things. I am usually a pretty optimistic and positive person, so I find that I get the positive benefits of checking things off lists, but if I don't check everything off the list, I will be fine with that. But you need to judge how recording all those things will have a particular impact on you. That being said, I do make lists in my book journal, which is the third way of documenting that I'm going to talk about today. And if I do not check the ones off those lists, then I do get very upset because I color code them. And then if there are colors out of sequence in my color coded list, that I really do not like. So that is my own little internal motivation to get things done. For the 21 books I wanted to read in 2021, I have been checking them off by highlighting them in rainbow order. And I'll just put a little picture up here. And that is such an internal motivator, because I do not want to have to open that notebook and find that I am missing one of the colors in sequence. That will really end up bothering me. So I also use this journal as a way to keep myself motivated and to read the books that I have been telling myself to read for many, many years. But the reason that I decided to kind of level up, I guess, or evolve into using the book journal on top of just documenting the books that I read every month or read every year, is that I was missing some context. So even though I have found it really valuable to go back and see the books that I have read, especially in my year that my daughter was born. So in 2014, my daughter was born. And that year I had a newborn baby. I had transitioned from medical school to residency. I did not take maternity leave because there was no maternity leave available to me. I would have had to take unpaid leave, which was just not feasible for a new family. And I was on call basically at least every 4, but sometimes every 3 days, depending on holidays. So I had a new baby that my husband was driving to the hospital so I could feed her. Then I would kind of jump back into being on call either in the OR or in the ER, because I started off not as a psychiatrist, but as a generalist who was doing a rotating internship. And I was pregnant for the second time. My kids are 1 year apart. So they were born back to back. So that is by far the busiest, hardest year of my entire life. And if I did not document the books that I was reading at that time, I would have no idea that I even read them. I have no idea why I picked up the things that I picked up. And it was some of that context that was missing that made me want to start a kind of a more detailed book journal. So last year during the pandemic, I needed an outlet from studying and from just, the world in general, having both kids at home, doing school, homeschooling, working, all of that kind of stuff at the same time was a challenge, as it was for everybody. And so making this book journal was something that I found very therapeutic. It was something that I could kind of carve out 15 or 20 minutes to do on my own every day. And I was able to inject a little bit of that context that had been missing in terms of my book list. On top of just recording what I read every month, I could now write down, for example, Patrick talked about this on his channel, or Mike talked about this on his channel. And so I felt like I had to read it. And so I had that context for how the book came onto my radar. And then I usually record a little bit about how I felt about the book and any parts that really stood out to me. It is much less a review, so it is not at all like a review that I would write for Goodreads, but more just some information about the book that can give me in the future some context for how I picked it up and how I felt about it. And I'm hoping that once I'm, 5 or 10 years out from making these book journals, that I'll also feel the same way as I do looking back on just the book lists themselves. I have to say that it has been pretty easy for me to keep up with because I really enjoy it. It is not something that I feel like I am forced to do, something that I feel like I have to do. Unlike sometimes with Goodreads, like for example, right now, I think the last 6 books that I read, I have not written a review for. And sometimes that can feel like a lot of pressure because I feel like I link my Goodreads in my videos and I need to write these reviews so that people can know what I think about or how I feel. And then I don't want to write them unless I feel like they sound really good. If I want the grammar to be perfect so that I don't have people nitpicking and, not that it really matters in the grand scheme of things, but I can be a perfectionist and I don't like sending things out into the world unless I am happy with them. But with this journal, it's just me who looks at it. Maybe one day when I am no longer here, it will be something that my kids will find valuable. If they also enjoy reading, it might be a memory that they have or something that they can hold on to. But for right now, it's just me who looks in there. So I don't feel that same pressure. If I want to write in jot notes, I can write in jot notes. If I want to write nonsense or gibberish or just gush about the things that I loved, then I can do that. And it helps me frame the thoughts that I have about the book without that pressure that I sometimes get from writing a review on Goodreads. So as of right now, I really enjoy the book journal. I usually pick out a theme. Well, I always pick out a theme every month, and it just ends up being a book that I really like. I have done a Hobbit theme, a Lord of the Rings theme, Harry Potter, Fortunately the Milk, The Song of Achilles, Watership Down. There's been a bunch of my favorite books that I have incorporated into these themes. And I have had a really good time doing it. So if you have been thinking about documenting what you read in any way that makes sense to you, I think that it is a really rewarding, really valuable exercise. I personally think that the things that we read, the books that we find important, the books that we find ourselves reaching for year after year, do reflect on our personalities, and they do say something about us as people. Obviously, reading is a huge part of my life. I think that the books that I choose to read and how I choose to read them do reflect on my beliefs and my values and the type of person that I am always becoming. So I would highly, highly recommend keeping track of what you read. And I would love to know how everybody else keeps track of things. Do you keep up on Goodreads? Do you write things down? Do you not care at all? I cannot be a person who doesn't care. It is just my personality. My husband does not document anything. He does not keep track of his books. He is a very laid back person. And I found this out very early. So we met actually as lab partners in organic chemistry, which I was taking as an elective from my arts degree. And our personalities were vastly, vastly different. And I admire how he can just let go of things that I cannot let go of, that I'm incapable of letting go of, and how he can have such a relaxed approach to certain aspects of life that I cannot at all be calm about. So I would be interested in knowing if you keep track of the things that you read, how you do it. If you don't keep track of them, I would really like to hear about that. And again, I just needed to do this video today because I needed to cheer up, and it has worked. So even if nobody else wants to watch this, it has accomplished my goal in making me feel better. And if you did enjoy and you have any thoughts about tracking what you read, then I would love to hear them. And I will see you soon with another regularly scheduled BookTube video. Bye.